Welcome to the High Performance Hockey Podcast. Today we're joined by founder and partner of Human Performance International, Dr. Dana Sinclair. Dana is a licensed psychologist who consults with individuals from the medical, corporate, and entertainment worlds, as well as the professional athletes in the NFL, NHL, NBA, Major League Baseball, and MLS. She's worked with a number of Olympic teams, taking her to the Olympic Games in Nagano, Sydney, Salt Lake City, and Tokyo, in her capacity as the team's performance psychologist. A former international athlete herself, Dana served as the captain of the Canadian field hockey team and played hockey for the University of Cambridge. She has 2 doctorate degrees, one from the University of Cambridge and one University of Ottawa, and is a clinical assistant professor with the Faculty of Medicine at the University of British Columbia. The Canadian Baseball Network ranked her number 9 on the 2016 Most Influential Canadians in Baseball's Top 100 list. Very, very insightful conversation that we have today with Dr. Sinclair. We talk about her career in sports psychology, the high performance model, the technical, tactical, the physical, and in this case, the psychological, and where we are in high performance hockey. We talk about the zone, how to get in the zone, what derails us from getting in the zone, and the big elephant in the room, mental toughness. It's a fantastic hour of conversation. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Doc. Thanks so much for joining us.
Looking forward to it.
This is going to be an awesome hour. I was actually referred to you from a colleague of mine, Ryan Smith, who you've worked with in the past.
Yes.
He went on and on about you as a practitioner, as a person, and I know the audience is really excited to learn from you today. And quite frankly, this is a subject that I think everyone in high-performance hockey is trying to educate themselves as best they can with. So it's going to be a really, really interesting educational hour for us. I would like you to start, if you could, your background in your skill of sports psychology. Could you give us an idea of where you came from and where you are right now, Doc? In terms?
Sure. Well, I guess I started out, I was on the national team, played field hockey for Canada, had a great time doing that, then moved back into school, right? And got a PhD in sports psychology, realized that, I kind of made a mistake with that because I could not get a license as a psychologist. So I kind of redirected myself and did another PhD in psychology at Cambridge in England. Got my license, so then I could go back. I started working in reproductive psychiatry, if you can believe that, at hospitals.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Postpartum depression, etc. But I still had a great time. So I was doing a lot of research and whatnot. And I was clinical assistant prof at UBC and in that realm, but I still was working with athletes on the side. And my husband had started sort of a management consulting firm. So I was getting tired of where I was. So I joined him and did the sports side of the business. So I had my license. I got my license. I was able to go work for anybody I wanted to, and I've had a blast ever since.
Very interesting. So you are a business owner. You are currently a clinical assistant professor with the Faculty of Medicine at the University of British Columbia, and you consult. What does a typical day look like for you? Is it very different? Is it a lot of travel?
Yes. So I am a consultant, mostly. I mean, I do research for, different medical groups and whatnot here and there. But a typical day, it can be anything, but I'll just take you through last week. I was at spring training with the Washington Nationals. So you're up meeting with individual guys during the day, out watching them pitch or play or hit or seeing them in the batting cages, talking to them, and get up and do it all over again for however long you're there. So a lot of fun because I get to work with people who are really interested in getting better.
Yes.
And it's really motivating.
Absolutely interesting. And we're going to peel the onion back on that because I want to ask kind of what those areas are specifically when you consult and how you help teams. But I want to hit on your career a little bit as an athlete and how it led you to study psychology. You were a former captain for Canada's national field hockey team, and now you're a sports psychologist. As a former athlete, was it something that you felt perhaps you could have reached a higher potential if it wasn't for if there was a hole in the game? It maybe was the mental side. How did you was it by experience that you got into sports psychology as an athlete? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Well, funny, I started as an Aggie at university and then was on the national team. And the mental side just intrigued me because I saw if you were strong mentally, what it could do to your talent level, right? Because
Yes.
most people, they don't fail because of their talent. They fail because they can't get the mental approach right. Now, okay, I was lucky. Mentally, I was good. I got, I had a short career because I actually had a big fight with the national coach before the Olympics. So that was that. So, I would have played longer,
Yes.
but I was stopped short. And so then I started to think, okay, what do I want to do? And I was trying to think of career-wise what I want to do. And just sports seemed like a great place to be because that's what I knew and what I was good at. So I just kind of ended up there. It wasn't out of any specific desire or need. It was kind of fun.
Yes. I want to pivot slightly. We talked before getting on the air here about our audience and specifically high performance hockey. I want to shift to the paradigm now, at least what I'm seeing as a performance coach, and I want to get your feedback and perhaps where that lands in the sport of hockey. I look at four coactives in the standard of what we're looking at as a holistic approach for an athlete. We have the physical, like strength and conditioning, the technical, tactical with the coaches and skill coaches, etc. Then we have the psychological. And I think, and I can't speak on everyone's behalf, I'm talking from my own bias and my own experience, this is an area where I feel a lot of teams are now slowly starting to get on the Rolodex, for lack of a better word, and they're starting to refine that department. Your opinion right now, professionally, of where we are in the sport of ice hockey, building that high-performance model on the psychological side of things?
Middling. I think some teams do it very well.
Okay.
Not many.
Yes.
They might have people available, but they don't necessarily hit the performance side, I think, as well as they should. But there are a lot of progressive managers in professional sports, and I've been lucky enough to to have dealt with a bunch of them. And they are keen on this zone. They want the help for their players. They recognize that, the head runs the show and that they better get some sort of person or programming in place. So it's but it's in pockets.
And your opinion now, I'd imagine that side of this high performance model, and I don't know, I can't speak on behalf of all teams. Is it more right now in the National Hockey League or in college hockey? I think college might be actually doing it better. I spoke to several college coaches where they have a full-time sports psychologist at the expense whenever the athlete would need it.
Right.
In the National Hockey League or Major League Baseball or the NBA, you consult in all of these leagues. Is it more of just consulting, or is there full-time positions in this model?
There are full-time positions in that model, but I must say, I think the better model is a consultant model. So somebody in my position, they're every day, all the time, I don't think is as effective as somebody coming in regularly.
Interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me, can I ask why?
Of course. I think that if you're there every day, partly athletes don't want to feel, even if there's no stigma or anything, they don't want to feel that they're supposed to be talking to someone about how they feel or about their performance all the time.
Yes.
My approach is to make the athletes or my clients independent of someone like me. They don't need me 24/7. They're already really good at what they do, right? They don't need help all the time. And I don't even regard my work with them as help. It's about sort of helping them understand what they're like as a player, as a person, as a performer, and then showing them some ways to be able to control their emotions when they feel pressure. So if I can help them understand what goes wrong,
yes,
like on a bad day,
yes,
and guide them to what they have to do to replicate the stuff they do on the good day, then they can take it and run with it themselves.
Very well stated. I like that idea. Yeah.
Too many people, I think, feel that, they are looking for a way to keep a job or to be useful, or I've got to have something to say to hold my job. Whereas these people are, whether it's college or pro, they're pretty good at what they do.
Yes.
Right. And it's all about getting the most out of ourselves. So help them in the areas where they need to be a little bit better or to fight back or whatever it is, and leave the rest alone.
I really like this for a lot of reasons. I can speak, I think it's giving someone a fish or teaching someone how to fish, right?
Yeah.
To educate. I always say to our athletes, even our pros that come in, if I see you 4 hours out of a 168-hour work week, that's 4% of the work week. What are you doing away from here? And the key really is, can we educate you enough to make those decisions away from here? And then I guess in this case, it's whatever that athlete needs from a mental standpoint, whether it's performance, recovery, et cetera. You find those areas, you dot the I's, cross the T's, you educate, and then you revisit.
Yeah. Well done. Yep. That's it.
That's awesome.
It,
Yes.
And I like to sort of simplify it.
And when you come in for consulting, I wanted to ask you, are there buckets or layers for what you do? And my question is it performance? Is it overall mental health? Is it finding modes of recovery, rest, regeneration, or is it all of those?
It's all of those.
Okay.
The basic main services are, I'll throw one in there, draft services. So I will go in to teams and go to a combine and assess the players, the prospects that they're interested in, and give them an idea of how that player is going to develop over a long season, over time.
Yes.
How much work they're going to be, right? Or not. And if you should perhaps see them as a red flag and don't touch them because they're going to destroy your culture.
Yes.
So I will give teams that information on players, like I would do in a business as well, for hiring, selection. And then the other main part is performance. Now, personal stuff does come up, of course, because that affects our performance, especially under pressure.
Yep.
So those types of things have to be dealt with. But by large scale, it's performance. People like to think, there's so much going on. There's so much pressure with these people that they need a full-time psychologist or whatever. No, they don't.
Yes.
It's like everybody else. We all have ups and downs, but the main work that I do is performance related, because if your performance is going well, where do you think your mental health is? Especially as if it's something that you do, hockey, college, it's your identity, it's your main priority, say. If you're playing well and feeling good about it and satisfied, your mental health's in the right zone too.
Yes. Very interesting. And I'd like that. I don't know if you can expand on this. Perhaps it's just more of a comment, but I like this idea of performance and then evaluating the individuals that potentially might be on your team someday. Those are tangible intangibles, right? Like character, motivation. Are those hard to measure? We're in an era now of metrics.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we're all in some capacity subjective, right? Regardless of how you're interpreting the metrics or not.
Yep.
So how do you, and I'm not asking you the secrets or the questions you ask, but how do you do that? How do you do that, Doc? Right.
Okay, so it's a behavioral assessment that I do. I'm looking at the behaviors of that person, so their performance styles. So everybody's got their own personality, part of it is, it's nature, nurture for sure. But by 18, we kind of know what we have, right? Yep. And, depending on the characteristics that you have, everybody can be good or behave for a period of time. But we all go back to our default style or behaviors when we're under pressure. So it's about me trying to figure that out, because I'm not worried about the person when they're not feeling pressure and when everything's going their way and there's no adversity. What I'm supposed to be able to figure out is, okay, when the chips are down and there's going to be trouble or pressure or expectations, where's this person likely to go? And, I'll talk about red flags all the way up to outstanding, right? And the outstanding people are hard to find, right?
Yes.
Behaviorally. Sort of 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, all those people, they're good. So like outstanding, superior type of thing, unremarkable. Those people, yeah, just let them go. They'll be fine. They might need some help here and there, but they're fine. Yep. Then we get to, say, the 4th zone flags. Okay, this guy, might have some maturity issues, always. Might not be assertive enough, might lose his focus, but we can work with him, right?
Yep.
So beware, needs some work. And then the red flag bucket, trouble. Those are the ones that people, scouts and managers fall in love with the talent of these guys because they're often very good.
Yes.
But they negate how that person is going to behave on a daily basis under pressure.
And so important because in a team sport like hockey, if that culture soils, it affects the locker room, it affects the environment affects multiple athletes, and then you've got a problem.
Yes.
Regarding the performance element, you talked about coming into the draft, asking questions, and the performance element. If I'm a player on the team, how do I approach you? Do I have a resource? Do I have a phone number? How does that work for a player?
You mean if I'm a consultant and a player wants to engage?
Yes.
Well, a lot of it is incumbent upon me to make sure that, like, usually I'm just I don't get any guidance half the time. I'm just like, okay, get down there and fix something. So I had to learn how to do that. So it's incumbent upon me to make sure that these guys know I'm there if they want. They, sometimes they'll take their time to, they're going to be a little unsure. They don't know if it's confidential or not. Sometimes I will say with hockey, usually I'm in there on my own, just, on the planes, on the buses, at games, at practices, and you just get to know people.
Yes.
And word of mouth, right? Yep. So they'll connect with you because I will go in regularly.
Yes.
And then they have my number anyway, so they can get to me if they want. But a lot of it is done when I'm there. Say with football, I'll get into the auditorium in a team meeting and the coach will introduce me and let me have, 15 minutes to let everybody know what I do, how to get a hold of me, what they can expect if they meet with me. And that's that. So some teams, they will say, okay, these number of guys, you have to go see her. Other teams will say, you're on your own.
Got it. I want to pivot a little bit. And I want to talk now, peel on the onion back a little bit more. I want to talk about this idea of the zone. Doc, it's a buzzword everywhere in the zone. So I have could you explain it? What is the zone and how do we get there?
Okay. In essence, the zone is when you are performing, when you are calm enough, so you can stay focused on what you're doing.
Okay.
That's the zone.
Okay.
The way to get to the zone, and again, people like to think it's supposed to be automatic. I'm my best when I don't think. I just go out there and do. And that is great. On a good day like that, I say, have at it, go have fun.
Yes.
But I always say to my clients, okay, but you and I are responsible for those bad days when, because they can be elusive, those good days, right? You just wake up and it's not there. It's our mindset that changes, not the skill set, right?
Yes.
So what I have to do is get guys to figure out what gets in their way. So on a bad day, what distracts you? What derails you? What are the hot spots? What frustrates you? Why are you in that mental zone? And then we can move on to the skills to get them out. So as I always say to them, I say, hey, I don't care how you feel. I care what you do. When I really do care how they feel. But
sure,
when they're not feeling confident, or if they are having self-doubt, so they're worried about results or feeling expectations, it's all feel, and they get worked up about that. So they're in the bad day box, right? In that distracted zone. Okay, well, we all get there, and who cares? It doesn't matter. What you need to do is be able to shift over, right? When you drift over to that bad zone, you got to be able to shift over, and that takes some pre-planning.
Yes. I remember vividly I was playing junior hockey in Northern Ontario a while back now. My brother and I saw a sports psychologist, and it was fantastic. One of the tools they gave me and this is probably the wrong word to explain it, were like, they were one word, two words, and then I could cut them out and put them on my stall, or I could put them out, a constant reminder to do small things. What kind of tools can we use to get athletes back in the zone? Is it, obviously I know it's context dependent, I know it's personal, but do tools like that work? Is it just positive self-talk? Yes?
Yes and yes. So there are about 7 that I think are good, but the main 2, if you can't get your tension down, you're done.
Yes.
So on a good day, people's tension, say on a scale of 1 to 10, it's on the low side, right?
Okay.
And I say anything from 5 and under, you're fine. Because having that tension low, what that does for you is allows you to think. And I'm a big believer in, you're going to think out there. You're going to be thinking anyway. You might as well be thinking effectively.
Yeah.
People like to say, I just need to stop thinking. No, you're going to be thinking, relax. Let's just make sure we have the right stuff to pop in there when you need it. So you talk about those cues, those 1 or 2, absolutely. That's the next big skill. The trick about that one, though, is you can't just say, I've got to be aggressive. I've got to really compete. I've got to just skate hard. Those are big bucket terms. You got to get down. You got to drill down a little and figure out, when I am not very good, what am I forgetting to do? What am I not doing? Am I standing around? Am I drifting by the net? Am I stopping, right? Am I behind the net and sort of messing around? Like, what am I doing when I'm good versus not good? So you've got to drill down to get those actual cues that will help you in the moment tell your body what to do.
And I would imagine that's a challenge in a highly chaotic, intense game like hockey, where it's an emotional game, right? Like it's an emotional game. Can you tame emotion and use it as your friend, or is the trick to take that and put it aside, if that makes sense? Can you use emotion as your friend?
Well, you can if you manage it. So I don't advocate, get angry, all that kind of stuff. It's my whole job is to help people, whether it's a surgeon or an actor or a hockey player, learn to manage their emotions when they're feeling stressed.
Yes.
Right? Because when they're not stressed, it's fine.
Yes.
It's when they're under pressure that they can tip over the apple cart or whatever, right?
Yes.
So it's about figuring out ahead of time what's going to rock your world in terms of your emotions, and figure out a workaround for when you get there in the moment.
Yes.
So you've got to do a little bit of work in terms of thinking, okay, what do I need to get away from, in this next game? I need to calm down and focus on what I'm going to do. What are those things that I need to do? And
Yes.
it's the regular, as I say, be aggressive, work hard, one for the team. It's not that at all.
Yes.
It's about taking care of your backyard and making sure that you figure out what you need to do. Some guys simply need to stop circling, drives coaches nuts. They need to start, stop, right? And play properly that way. Other guys need to hold on to the puck.
Yes.
Instead of just dumping it every time they get it because they're scared, right? So it's about being honest and accurate with yourself and figuring out, what am I messing up? What am I not doing?
Yes.
And people will avoid that sometimes.
Very interesting. I was reading your bio in preparation for our interview, and I won't mention the name. He's a former National Hockey League player, very, very good player. And he talked about this idea, and you talked about mental pre-planning. Is that something where you look at someone's individual game and say, thinking ahead of the next opponent, here's what I need to do, and be precise about that? Or is that what you're referring to in mental pre-planning?
Yeah, it's not so much the next opponent. It's you in your core determining how you need to be better, what you need to do to be better.
Okay.
And you apply that to pretty much every opponent.
Got it.
And that's the good base. And then if it's an opponent that you need to think more about, okay, then you add to that. Say like baseball's an easy one. If you're a catcher, obviously in a pitcher, you're preparing for your opponents every game. But that's layered on top. That's information layered on top of what you're going to do in the tough moments.
Yes.
Right?
Interesting too, and obviously you're dealing with high performers in multiple sports, but we'll keep it to hockey, where you probably the biggest pundits are going to be probably ourselves in the mirror when you're an elite hockey player, right? You're going to be the biggest judge of yourself. I listened to a podcast, a previous podcast, and your host asked a great question. I want to ask it again because I thought it was very fantastic. He said the difference between perfection and excellence. This idea, could you expand upon that for the listener for us?
Perfectionism is rampant. There's a lot of pressure everywhere to be the best, great, the best of all time, all that kind of stuff. And that's a problem because trying to be perfect is not going to happen. It's a script for failure. It's just the way it is. Nobody is perfect. It causes stress. It causes poor performance. Your performance breaks down if you're always going for results. Know you want the results. I know everybody. I don't even have to ask anybody. Everybody I talk to, their goal is to be great, to be spectacular, right?
Yes.
So trying to be perfect is derailing. Whereas if you're trying to be excellent, what's wrong with that? That means I'm trying to execute correctly, execute properly. And if I'm doing that, I'm going to be good.
Yes.
So I feel very strongly about that perfection, trying to be perfect, it's just an excuse waiting to happen, because at some point in your game, you're going to make a mistake or it's not going to be perfect. And that's when people slide right back into that distracted zone and take themselves out of the game.
Yes. It's interesting because I wanted to ask this down the line, but I want to jump to it right now. Talk about distraction and perfection. I mean, you are fighting an uphill battle. I see you. We all are right now in this day and age with social media. Everything's perfect. My gosh, you post everything and it's everybody else's highlights. And what they fail to show you is the valleys, right? Everyone's living on the mountain. I did this. I got my PhD. I won this. I did that. And the danger is that we have an ill-informed measure of what good is because we're measuring everybody else's highlights. How do you relay that message to your athletes in this day and age of social media?
Well, it's a good question. I don't think it's as tough as people want to think, because again, if we bring the idea back to, of course people want results.
Yes.
It's hard to get the best out of ourselves at times, but that's all we can do is if we can get the most out of ourselves, we're going to get better results. We're going to be satisfied, right?
Yes.
Searching or striving to be number one, that doesn't really make sense.
Yes.
To be the best that you've got, for sure. That's realistic and get your arms around that. So that's where people get their satisfaction, is if they can get as much out of themselves as what's there on a regular basis. Then everybody's fun. It's like if you play great, but you lose, that's better than not playing very well because you don't feel very good about yourself, right?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. In terms of other distractions, you talk about the value of self-talk. Is that something you think players should engage in on a daily basis or just when needed? You hear some behind the scenes cameras from the NFL and there are people literally talking in third person about themselves. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Is there a value in that? Have you found value in that for your various clientele?
A ton of value. And where it's good is, and I'm not a big sort of affirmations person. I'm the greatest. I'm this. Like, I want real life. I want them to be telling themselves what's true. So I want them to have sort of an evidence list, a fact list, things that they can roll through, accomplishments that they can tell themselves that nobody can take away from them because they're facts. It's not made up junk, right?
Yes.
It's real that they can land on. The self-talk is, I think, very important. One, for talking your way through a performance through your cues, like getting to your cues as to what to do. That's a form of self-talk.
Yep.
More self-talk is making sure you're not succumbing to the negative self-talk. So realizing, hey, when I'm negative and when it's not going well, I'm saying this to myself, I'm saying that to myself. He's not going to put me in, he's going to bench me for the rest of the game. I've only got 8 minutes. What's the point in trying? gosh, there's a whole bunch of negative things you can say. I like people to figure out what those things are and then find a workaround so that they have some self-talk that they can use to manage that, as opposed to just going to, I'm the greatest, it'll be okay, I'm a beast, they can't touch me. I mean, if that works, great. But it's got to be semi-real,
Yes,
It's got to be
absolutely.
constructive.
Yes, absolutely. I know this podcast is for really high performance hockey players, but I want to dive into the youth aspect too, just to touch on it just a hair. What can parents do? My dad never dreamed on my behalf. He gave us every opportunity in the world, but he had two rules: you work hard and you have fun. We right now, our business in Columbus, Ohio, services a lot of young athletes, and I would imagine that speaking it starts underneath your roof, right? Positive self-talk, this and that.
Yeah.
What should parents maybe stay away from, and then what are good guidelines for parents? I know that might be a kind of a sticky subject or a slippery slope. I mean, every parent's different, but keeping mental health at the forefront.
Yeah. Well, I think parents do have to check themselves because there's a lot of vicarious living through
Oh yes,
kids,
yeah,
right?
yep,
That's the biggest thing. And there's so much push to work hard, to be better, to pay attention to me. I mean, there's so much sort of control that parents feel they have every right to do.
yes,
It gets in the way. So, I mean, how do you tell the difference between when you're helping your kid and supporting your kid versus crossing the line and, pushing them to be more than they want to be? Or, I mean, it's about talking to your kid, right?
yep,
But they don't listen. A lot of parents won't listen to their kids because
yep,
they know best,
sure,
right? And, parents do have to sort of look at their own lives and see where they're unfulfilled and where it never worked out for them and, break it back.
yep,
So I think they need to let coaches do more of the work. I think they need to maybe ask their kid after the game, hey, what did you think? What went well? What didn't go so well? Any adjustments for next time? And take your cues from your kids a little bit more as opposed to waiting for them to get in the car and saying, you were terrible, or you made a mistake on that one, didn't you? Here, let me tell you how to fix that.
absolutely. I like this idea of letting the coaches coach too, especially I think, everyone has their kid's best interest in mind. I think if I look back now,
Maybe.
yeah, good
Some
point.
don't.
Good
Some
point,
are
Doc.
too self-focused to even care what the kid is feeling, right? They're doing it for their benefit. They want their kid to be number one, get
Yeah,
more time, get that scholarship, right?
great point. Very good
Yeah.
point. I think piggybacking on that, when you brought up the word coaches, I mean, I look back now from my career and now, like me, some of the most important people and most influential people in my life are coaches. I think if you can get a situation where your son or daughter has a really good coach that is not so much at a young age a transactional coach, but a transformational coach who creates a good environment, who is a leader, who talks the talk and walks the walk. I think that's putting your kid also in a pretty darn good environment to grow. But last question here from a player standpoint, and then I want to pivot to coaching. And I'm kind of jumping all over here, Doc, so I apologize.
No, I'm having.
This is life after hockey. I know is something that's very difficult for a lot of players. Whether
Yeah.
I can tell you, for me, I was done playing 2 years after college, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had no clue, and I'd imagine I was lost, quite frankly. I know for some players it's a career-ending injury. I know for some their contracts bought out. I know for some, either way. Perhaps it's, this idea of being on a schedule and now all of a sudden having time. This is clearly happening in hockey. What can we do, if anything, to help this? Get better resources, talk more? What's the...
Yeah. Okay. So I did my first PhD, my first dissertation in the transition from high performance sport.
Great, okay.
So, I mean, knowing that, at the high levels, it can be difficult because by that time, it is a part of a person's identity. They feel good about themselves because They're an expert at something. This is what they do. You take that away, they've got to find a second career. Every, hockey player has to find a second career, right? No matter how good you are, right? And that transition is, I guess, countered by how you leave. So if it's planned, if it's on your own terms, if you have money, that's different than injury, deselection, a fight with a coach, whatever.
Yes.
So if it's voluntary or involuntary, it makes a difference to your trajectory, right? So some people obviously handle it just fine. So I don't want to say that everybody has an issue with it.
Yep.
But yeah, a lot of people do find it difficult to leave it behind because it's what their primary focus was, and it's how they see themselves, and it gives them self-worth and value to themselves. Right? So what can we do about it? Well, it's a tough one. There are programs and whatnot, of course, and agencies try to help, schools try to help. I think having finances to go back to school is a good thing.
Yes.
Because, you need to, depending on your level, you need to be tooled up for that second career. But really, it starts earlier. If all you're taught is that you've got to go to the NHL, kid, or you're nothing, you don't have any backup education or other things to do, anything meaningful to go to, it's difficult. It's trouble.
Yes.
The transition is made easier if afterwards you do have something meaningful to keep you busy. Those are the two big things. Whether it's staying fit, whether it's taking on something new, whether it's paying attention to a new zone you're interested in, career-wise. You can't just sit there and hope for the best. If you're not involved in something new and meaningful or keeping busy, it's trouble. It's trouble.
And I would imagine too, with we talked about prior, having that high performance model and the resources to be able to speak with someone during that time would probably be huge, right? I mean, I know you said that's something that we're continuing to build upon, the psychological aspect in this model, but having those resources would be very important at this time.
Yes. And, talking to someone, it's nice to know that it's going to normalize it for people who are going through it, and to know what's happening, and, that they're not alone, but also to encourage them, help them get started somewhere else if they haven't already. And I would love to see, there be more resources or support for not just being a one-dimensional person.
Yes.
Earlier on.
Yes.
Which is hard to do, because how do you make it to the NHL if you're not doing that all the time?
It's a good point. And it comes at the expense of a lot of other things, right?
It's not a sacrifice. I don't want to say that these people sacrifice everything, because they're doing exactly what they want to do.
Yes, yes.
Right? So I don't buy that, because we've all, done it and trying to get good at what we do. But it would be nice to have some encouragement to get some other things going on the side, or at least see realistically where you're going with your career, which is hard too at the time, because nobody wants to believe that it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
And in the moment.
I mean, I know this is $1 million question, but does that start in how you're raised? The importance of education, having hobbies, or is that just something as, regardless of how you're raised, hey, guess what, Anthony, you're starting to play high performance hockey, you're going to start whittling down. You've got to start, there's no choice at that point. It's, you're going to be the survival of the fittest, and you've got to specialize at that point.
Yeah. And you've got to know what's coming on the other side. So the education piece, I think, is huge. The hobby thing, well, if you want a hobby, great. I don't know if you don't, fine by me. But the education thing seems, for me, is a big piece. So, junior hockey especially, got to get the education piece.
Sure.
And that's kind of short-shrifted sometimes.
Yep. I want to pivot and transition a little bit. We talked about this idea of being in the zone, from athletes, the difference between perfection and excellence. I want to pivot really into coaching, a real big hot button specifically in coaching, and coaching, let me be specific, performance coaching, strength and conditioning. And you see it in social media all the time, this idea of mental toughness.
Oh, yeah.
And I have my own bias, and I don't want to give it to you because I want to ask you this question first. What is mental toughness?
Well, I'm dying to hear your bias. I think that's again a bit of a sort of a fluffy term. It's like grit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Agreed.
Mental
Yeah.
toughness. Okay. Okay. So mental toughness. It's basically what people are trying to say with that is when adversity hits, can you cope with it? When things aren't going your way, can you settle down and get back to the job at hand? That's really it.
Yep.
And that's all my stuff is can you control your emotions under pressure and get back to your skill set and not letting your head and your emotions take you out of the game.
Yes.
So a lot of people aren't good at that naturally, right? We like to think that hockey players are assertive, aggressive, forceful, competitive people. And you know what? In my experience, they're like everybody else in every other league or whatever. And some people are, but most are not. And sometimes they have to learn to take action when it's tough out there, or they have to settle down and stay focused, right? Or they have to take care of their own assignments instead of complaining about everybody else, right? So mental toughness, some people are born with it. But again, it really is just being able to recognize when you're getting distracted and calm down enough to move on to your skill set and what to do in the moment.
Yes.
And everybody can learn to be better at that.
Love it. Here's my bias, at least from this,
Okay,
the strength and conditioning portion, strength and conditioning. And I see this more on social media, but you know, you're bringing in, I call it target context, target environment. For example, you know, let's do a Navy SEALs workout. We're going to get mental toughness. How is that going to do anything on the ice? Like, you know, for me, like if you put me as a paratrooper jumping out of a plane, my heart rate would go through the roof. I would be scared to death. You put me in the ice, I'm calm. Yeah. I can learn to control my emotion. That to me is mental toughness. When you know what hits the fan, it's context dependent. The sad thing, at least in performance, and not a lot of the listeners that we're listening to are specialized, they're high end, but a lot of times you'll see in social media, either teams bringing in like a mental toughness coach where guys are vomiting in hand baskets. You know, you've got a 5-minute wall sit with a guy with 300 pounds on their lap. And the message behind that is mental toughness.
And those guys aren't qualified to do the job.
Very well put. And that's the bias that I have, and that we, as a coaching culture, are trying to move out.
Yes.
But you see it even at high levels.
Absolutely. And it's the same in my area, in my industry. There's a lot of people who want to be at what they think is the show. They want to be attached to high performance athletes. So they will say anything or they're like gurus. They're not even qualified, but they're trying to come up with a different approach that people will buy. So, you know, in performance psychology, with certain teams, you get the military buy-in nowadays, right? It seems to be the hot button. Okay, get somebody who's got a military focus, and we're going to make sure these guys, just like that you said, the Navy SEALs, and get them to do. It's a completely different context.
Sure.
And they're not even working on the right skills. So again, there's a lot of people that aren't qualified in your zone and in my zone.
Yeah. It's scary too, because I always say there's unintended consequences with everything. And whether you bring someone in like that from a physical standpoint and hurt somebody, they take away doing what they're doing, or you get young, impressionable people who think that's the right way to do it. Or you've got athletes that buy into it and they're studying for the wrong test. They spend all summer studying for Spanish, and they got a geometry test coming up in August.
Yes.
So
long test.
Yeah. Well put. So we talk about this idea of context dependent. Would I go out on a limb and say that we can acquire mental toughness through finding ways that we've failed in the past, trying to isolate those and create a plan to combat those in the future, and in turn, turning that kind of fight or flight switch off and being able to think in those periods when this is happening.
Yes, be able to be good enough, to be able to think well enough to be able to get the job done. Again, doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be great. You just have to be on task in the moment.
Yep. So from a physical, for strength and conditioning, we want to avoid this. So what should players, in terms and measures of trying to avoid these, it's not so much avoiding these times, it's confronting them and having a game plan? Is that like...
Yes, very well said, because there's too much avoiding going on. That's what we all do. Fear of failure. People sabotage themselves. They go into sort of protection mode and they don't even know it, right?
Yep.
So, I'm thinking of so many people who they know they have to do A, B, and C on the ice. If I just play my game, if I just do what I normally do, I'm actually going to be successful. But they get tense when they're feeling pressure, and they know they should do it, but they know if they do it and it doesn't work out very well, they're going to be crushed. So they kind of hold themselves back a little, as opposed to being able to get the tension down and get back onto the do, right? They're getting too wound up with how they feel and what could happen, as opposed to settling down and moving their feet and holding onto the puck and winning their battles and finishing their checks, etc.
Interesting, because I want to parlay this into short-term competition and your work in the Olympics. But a story that often comes to my mind, this happened years and years ago, and I forget who related to me. It happened in the Olympics, and they had a coach speaking with their athlete, and the camera was panned up on them, and the favorites, this couple's had just performed before them in figure skating, and they fell, and they have the camera on the coach speaking to the players that are about ready to take the ice. And I couldn't believe it. The message was, hey, if we have a perfect competition, we don't fall, we're in for this for the gold. We're in this. And it was all about results, getting someone way overamped, overthinking, when the message more than likely should have been, have some fun. All the hard work's done. Enjoy this moment. Go out and leave it on the ice, guys.
True. And I would drill down take one step further and say, the only way you're going to have fun is if you can purposefully stay calm, breathe, talk to yourself, hit your performance cues, make sure you're ready and connected to when you're doing that quad. You better make sure that you do this one thing so you can stick the landing and then go on. And then maybe you've got to hit this part. Trying to keep them locked into what they're doing throughout their program is the key. Not taking them out of that and getting them ahead of it and saying, hey, you can do this. They're all in it for the gold. We all know that. So let's get on to how I'm going to win the gold, right?
Yeah.
And if I do that and stay connected, then guess what? I'm going to have good results. I'm going to be satisfied. I'm going to be having fun.
Yes.
So those are all outcroppings of staying on the do in the moment.
And I would imagine staying in the do. One of my favorite coaches, John Wooden, said, it's like queuing. That is like, it's like eating a Thanksgiving dinner. If you inhale it all at once, you're going to get indigestion. If you eat small little bites, you can digest it. So those cues, I'd imagine, are short, sweet, kind of like my hairline. Just remember these, stick with them, and have some fun. Is that accurate?
It's accurate, but you have to actually put some time into thinking about those cues.
Yes.
You don't want to be hitting cues that you already automatically do. It's a waste of your effort and your time.
Yes.
You've got to drill down and get to the things that you've got to be precise, and the things that you need to stay connected to get the job done, to execute correctly.
Yes.
And that takes, you have to sit down and think about that.
It's interesting too. I was relaying another story. We talked about this idea of figure skating. I was watching probably perhaps a year ago a UFC fight and the cornering, and it was awesome. This coach was very calm, and it was, hey, you're missing this. I want you to go under with this. This is what I want you to focus on this round. It wasn't a, hey, go get it. It wasn't. He was very technical. Hey, here's what I want you to focus on.
Technical.
Breathe, relax.
Yep.
Have your work be done. I thought it was genius. And then you can compare that maybe to the other side of the ring where someone's, there you go. It's contrasting, but it's very different.
Yeah. It's being able to sort of keep it down enough to be able to do what you do when you're feeling the pressure.
When you're in short-term competition, because you've worked several Olympics, I mean, I call it short-term competition because let's take, for example, a sport like hockey. I mean, it's over in what, 2 weeks? I mean, so is the goal there to educate the team as a whole on finding ways to keep that calm? Because as you know, it happens once every 4 years, and you can only imagine the pressure on these countries winning these gold medals.
But again, the way to manage that pressure, because everybody wants to win that gold medal, is about going, individual. The best thing you can do for your team is take care of your own backyard and take care of your own environment.
Yes.
That it's great for you and it's great for your team. So it really does come down to, I think too many teams at those levels or at those types of competitions are too brought up here. Believe in yourselves. We can do it. I want them to get down to the individual and say, hey, ask your players, okay, what are you working on? What have you got? Make sure they're clear with what your expectations are of them. Get them to talk to you. Don't start hammering at them and tell them what to do all the time. Have the conversation. Make sure they're clear on what they need to do so that they're more likely to actually do it, as opposed to getting too wound up and, I've got to run through the boards. Not helpful.
Like make your own bed, right? Make your own bed. Focus on your job assignments. And
that's the best you can do for the team because it's the best for you. Win-win.
I love it.
Not that we're into win-win, but,
I love it. We talked offline, but I need you to dive deep in this. What's the new book? I need to know about what's going on. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, I can. So I have a contract with Simon & Schuster, and it is, I'm just trying to finish it up now, and it is on performing under pressure, sort of getting the most out of yourself when you need it or when you want it.
Fantastic.
So again, it's about using client stories to illustrate the things that I think are important in high performance sport or high performing in any zone that you want. And it could be, taking exams. It could be doing presentations, interviews, as I say, surgeons, actors, IndyCar, whatever. We're all trying to perform and get the most out of ourselves. And there are certain things that I think people need to be aware of and get away from the rhetoric of, just be confident in yourself, just believe. And I'm saying things like confidence is overrated. You might want it, but you don't need it. You still got the skill set. It's about getting to those skills that you have been using for years when you need to, when you're getting tight.
Yes. Where are there any resources that we can point you to? Could you websites, et cetera, where people can learn more about you?
Probably just going to have to wait for the book.
And title of the book, is there a title?
Working title, Performing Under Pressure.
Okay. And possible release date. I'm asking you a lot, Doc.
I know. Well, hopefully could be by Christmas. That's what we're looking for. Yeah.
Okay.
But
awesome.
Finish off the last few chapters.
That's fantastic. Last question for you. Legacy. What, after your career is over in high performance, and again, I say sport, this can be everything. I mean, all under the umbrella. What do people want to remember you as or by?
Well, what I would like to leave is my next project would be trying to take these performance rules or process and apply it to kids so that young kids can start to learn how to do this early instead of get to a high level and then have to struggle with how to manage their emotions.
Yes.
That's something I'm really keen on helping young kids be able to do.
Fantastic. Our guest today has been Dr. Dana Sinclair. Doc, thanks so much for joining us.
Anthony, that was fun. Appreciate it.